Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Light to Unite launch. This is a new program that we're putting together starting tonight. We're going to have 4 podcasts over the next several weeks leading up to September 29th, which will be the official lighting of the unification of all Jews in America. So we're starting out by educating, having different speakers come from the rabbinical community, from the business community, 2 speakers next several Sunday nights, and then the objective is that on Sunday, September 29th, 2 o'clock in New York, 9 o'clock in Yerushalayim, we will be having as many Jews as possible, observant Jews, non-observant Jews, affiliated, not, to join together, to light and unite together so that we can fight here in America and around the world against anti-Semitism and all the challenges that we have facing us. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our 2 speakers tonight, Rabbi Paysach Krohn, Eli Goldbaum, and just a little bit about myself for a minute. My name is Tuvia Sablosky. I was born, raised, and educated in Philadelphia. I grew up as an ultra-secular Jew. I grew up as an American Jew. I was proud to be an American and be Jewish. But I fought with a lot of kids, had a lot of anti-Semitism because I went to a Christian prep school from the time I was 5 years old. It wasn't until I was 50 years old when my mom had passed away that a date brought me to meet Rebbetzin Youngreis. And my world changed that evening. I read a book she wrote called The Jewish Soul on Fire, and that's who I am, following in her footsteps. So this is really an honor of her also, and may her children continue with all of us to continue with our mission of Haneni. I also have many stories with Rabbi Paysach Krohn when I had my proper bris, because I didn't have one. I was circumcised in the hospital. Through Rabbi Yosher Youngreis, we had bris, and got to fill in and got my Hebrew name Tuvia, which Rebbetzin Youngreis named me Tuvia, and she told me when you get your tefillin, you get your bris, that's the name you have to be. So it gives me great pleasure to be able to collaborate again with Rabbi Paysach Krohn, with Eli Goldbaum, and Rabbi, please join us.
I'm deeply grateful to my dear friend, Rabbi Tuvia Sablosky, for having invited me to come to speak to all of you on this very important topic of containing anti-Semitism and assimilation here in America and throughout the world. The name of the program is Light to Unite, and the Inspire program and the Chazaq people are also involved in putting together this magnificent program. I'm honored to speak with Eli Goldbaum as well, and hopefully we'll be able to be inspired together. I would like to begin by telling you a story that shook me to the core, because when it happened at such an unexpected time. I give all of you that are watching the bracha that you should be able to sit with children and grandchildren at your Seder table. A number of years ago, this goes back more than 20 years, I was sitting at a Seder table. I was leading the table for my children and some of my grandchildren. And at that time, my little grandson, Avram, was 3 or 4 years old. And you know that a 3 or 4-year-old can't follow the Seder, and he's running from the living room to the kitchen to the dining room. And just as we were about to say Vehi Sha'amda, one of the most beautiful parts of the Seder, my grandson comes over to me and he says, Zaidi, can I sit on your lap? And of course, anybody who's a Zaidi or a Bubby, and when a grandchild wants to sit on your lap, of course, what's the question? So I picked up the cup of wine with my right hand, I picked up my little boy, my grandson, Avram Zelik, on my left lap, and we began singing Vehi Sha'amda. It's so emotional to me every time I tell this story. As we're singing Vehi Sha'amda, all of a sudden, I started crying. And people were wondering, what is he crying about? I mean, this is such a happy moment of the Seder. And you know, when you're crying and you don't want to cry, it just gets so hard to stop. And the reason that I was crying is because I was saying these words. The Baal HaGoda tells us, Shelo yechad bilvad omad aleinu l'chaleisenu. Not only one nation is trying to get rid of us. In every generation, they're trying to get rid of us. And I was thinking, Rabbanu Shalom, what's the future of this kid? What's the future of all the children in his generation? Haven't we gone through enough? We've lost 6 million. We've lost tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers. Doesn't it stop? When does it end? And that's the reason that I was crying. Of course, we finished singing Vehi Sha'amda, and we went on with the Seder, and I was able to compose myself. But as I was preparing for this talk, it occurred to me, when does it stop? Does it ever stop? Will it stop the terrible anti-Semitism that in every generation they're trying to get rid of us? And I want to tell you something frightening. A very sobering Gemara. The Gemara tells us in Shabbos Pei Tes Amud Aleph, my Har Sinai. Why was it called Har Sinai, the mountain of Sinai? And there are many, many different answers. I think the most frightening answer is Har Sheyorda Sina La'ilam. Hatred came down to this world. Sinai and Sina sound the same. And that's what the Gemara is telling us. Once the Jews got the Torah, there was a hatred that came down to the world. And it's interesting, if you watch what Rashi says, Rashi doesn't say that the hatred came because we were makabel the Torah, because we accepted the Torah. He writes, the reason why the sinna happened, shaloi kiblu by HaTorah. The Goyim didn't accept the Torah. And when they realized what Jews are all about, that we are people of a higher morality, people of higher ethics, people of higher standard that live with a person, with a purpose, that's why they hated us. Shaloi kiblu as HaTorah. They didn't want that. And they hate people who live that way because they know that's really how they're supposed to live. And because of that, that hatred is ingrained in the Gentiles. It's ingrained in the nations of the world because they know that we live on a higher standard that they are supposed to live, but they didn't want to live. After all, we all know the Chazal, Hashem offered the Torah to all of them. They didn't want it. Some wanted to kill, some wanted to rob, some wanted to be immoral, but the Jews accepted it. They didn't, and that's what makes them hate us. Now, I'll tell you an amazing Rashi. If you take a look at it in Parshas Vayishlach, it tells us in Bereshis Lamed Gimel Dalet, when Esav and Yaakov meet, Rashi tells us in Perek Lamed Gimel Pasuk Dalet, Omer Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai says halacha. It's a halacha. It's a fact of life. Biyodua. It's known. She Esav soinei liYaakov. Esav hates Yaakov. And you know what that means? That's how it's going to be forever until Mashiach comes. And the question is, are we able to do something about it? Now, all of us who live here in New York know that the New York Times used to be a great newspaper, but of course they're very much anti-Jewish and anti-Israel. But every once in a while they'll have a writer who writes something pro-Israel. And just yesterday, from when I'm making this video, there was an article by a fellow, Bret Stephens, and he wrote about Israel, and he wrote about Jews. And he had a remarkable sentence that I would like to quote. Hatred of Jews will always find a convenient explanation or excuse. It's always going to be there. And so I want to share with you something that I think is very profound. There's a wonderful Talmud Chacham in our generation today. His name is Rabbi Lipa Gelworth. He's a great thinker and a great speaker and a great Talmud Chacham. And he mentioned something very interesting, that there are two elements of anti-Semitism. One element of anti-Semitism is existential. Existential means they don't want us to exist. Like Iran talks today about Israel. They won't be happy until Israel doesn't exist. And I'm telling you, we cannot fight that. That's the anti-Semitism which we can do nothing about, because it came down from Sinai. Sinai yord al oilam. Halachahi Esav Sinai es Yaakov. There's a different type of negativism, that there is a contempt or hostility, and that is distaste. Goyim, nations of the world, have a distaste for Jews. That we can fight. And this talk that I am about to explain to you, this fighting anti-Semitism, we're never going to stop it. We can't until Mashiach comes. That's That's the existential hatred. They don't want us to exist. And thank goodness, Baruch Hashem, 1,000,000 times over, we live in a great country of America. And many of you who will be watching in Canada and in England and in Switzerland and some of these places, also, the anti-Semitism is not existential like it is in the Muslim countries. It's dislike that we can fight. There are many, many people of the nations of the world who dislike us. And some of it is our fault. And that we have to be careful about. And I'm going to give an example. Do you know that there is a pasuk that the Klei Yakar expounds on? And the pasuk is in Dvarim Beis, pasuk Gimel. The pasuk is telling us that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, go up north. You've been at the Mount Sinai for a while. Now it's time to travel north. It says, Rav lachem soive sahar hazeh. You've been around this mountain a while. Penu lachem tzafoina. Go north. But the Klei Yakar says something brilliant. And every time I go to Prague, and he was the Rav in the Maral Shul after the Maral, I tell over this Klei Yakar. He says the word tzafoina comes from the word tzafon, which means hidden. And he says, keep a low profile. You don't want the goyim to hate you? Don't build the most gorgeous home. You want to build inside your house. Don't build outside your house where the goyim are jealous. And he writes like this, Shem yimtza ha-Yisraeli eze hatzlocha. Oz yitmenu. If you have a certain hatzlocha, don't buy the fanciest car so that the goyim on the block are going to be jealous of you. Don't talk about all your great successes if you're in a workplace where there are Gentiles there and everything that's going on and great in your life that you're able to take all the vacations. Keep a low profile. But then the Klei Yakar says that's not the nature of Jews. And he says, you know what happens? First of all, the reason that the Goyim hate us is because they feel we stole the brachas. Yaakov stole the brachas from Esav. But then he writes, this is the opposite. Said that Ba'artois Oyivim, when we live in the nations, in the countries of our enemies, Kimisha Yesh Laimona, any Jew that has 100, Mara es Atzmai b'malbushay kavod, he's got to dress beyond what he could afford, and he's got to make weddings beyond what he could afford. V'chashuva ki'ilo hoya le'kami alfa, he's trying to show as if he has thousands. Keep a low profile. Don't let the goyim speak about you. My mother used to say in Yiddish, don't rip out the eyes of other people. That's the first way to combat that anti-Semitism, which we can combat, the dislike, by not flaunting it. Keep a low profile. That's the first thing. And I'll tell you a fabulous story that Rabbi Friend once told, and what a fabulous lesson. Rabbi Friend once told a story about a fellow from Manhattan that came to visit the brisker of Rav Soloveitchik in the early 1950s. Now, we know the Soloveitchiks have genius memories. They don't forget anything. And in the conversation, Rav Brisker asked this gentleman, what do you do? And he said, Rebbe, I'm a lawyer in Manhattan. And the conversation continued, and 5 minutes later, again, the Briskerov asked the gentleman, what do you do? The guy was surprised. He just said what he did. He said he was a lawyer in Manhattan. He said, Rebbe, I'm a lawyer in Manhattan. He says, I know, you told me that 5 minutes ago, but that's not how a Yid answers that question. The guy was surprised. He realized that the Briskerov had set him up. And the Briskerov said, bring me down a Yonah, the prophet Yonah, from the shelf. And he showed him something remarkable. What a great lesson. And we read this every Yom Kippur. We all know the story about Yonah. Yonah was on a boat, and there was a tremendous storm. But the storm was only around the boat. It wasn't around the other boats out in the sea. So everybody, the captains and the sailors, knew that there was somebody on this boat that was causing this terrible thing to happen, that it was going to sink. And so they went to every person. And then it says that the sailors and the captains, they came over to Yonah, and they said, Hagino Lano, tell us, Luma, Lemiharo Azais, why is this happening? And listen what they said to him. Mamalachtacha, what do you do? What do you do? And listen to his answer. That was the question the Brisker Rav was asking this gentleman. You know what he said? Vayomer aleim. He said to them, Ivri anochi, I am a Yid. V'yas Hashem alekei hashamayim ani yorei. And I fear Hashem. Now watch what the Radak says. The Radak says, as soon as he said, Hashem alekei hashamayim ani yorei, I fear God, heishiv aleim al sheilosam. That was the answer, Mama Lachtecha. What do you do? You're not a lawyer. You're not a doctor. You're not a graphic artist. You're not a real estate agent. You're a Yid. That's how you bring in money. But what defines you? Mama Lachtecha, you're a Yid. And you know something? Rabbi Friend told an amazing thing. He said 2 weeks after he gave that shir, a stockbroker wrote him a note, and he said, I heard your shir, and I'm on the phone the whole time, a whole day, making all kinds of deals, and sometimes I do things that are not 100%, and I say things on the phone, so I had a paperweight made, and I keep it on my desk, and on my desk, that paperweight has 2 words on it. Ivri Anoichi. I am a Jew. And you know something? That's the second way to combat anti-Semitism of dislike. Just remember, you can't hide it. Wherever you go, snood or no snood, baseball cap, wearing it frontwards or backwards, a kangaroo cap, however you go, shaitel, no shaitel, big yarmulke, small yarmulke, no yarmulke, you can't hide it. Oh, if you're a Jew, then you got to be careful how you talk to that bank teller. You got to be careful how you talk to that waiter or waitress in the restaurant. You got to be careful how you talk to that steward or stewardess on the plane. They know you're Jewish. And if you act with kindness and with dignity, they're going to say, all Jews act like that. But if chas v'shalom, you say something nasty, heaven help you, if somebody filmed it, then it goes viral. We're not even talking about that. But you're giving incentive to nations of the world to hate you if you're nasty. So the first thing is, keep a low profile. The second thing is, just remember, Ivri Anoichi, and you have to act in that way. And there's one more thing. We have to remember that we're in Galus. And you know something? It's very hard to remember that in America. Baruch Hashem, 1,000,000 times over, we live in a malchus shel chesed. But don't we say every day, that our eyes should see when you return your glory to Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh. We are guests in America. You know what Rabbi Yankiv said, and I am very careful with this. I heard this many years ago. Rabbi Yankiv said a Yid should not wear his tallis over his jacket or coat on Shabbos in the street. Now, if you're in Monroe or you're in Square Town, that's fine. But even if you're in Monsey or in Lakewood or even in Williamsburg, the policemen are goyim, the firemen are goyim, the cops are goyim. So you don't own this place. It flaunts them. It bothers them. It looks as if you own the place. And that's what Rabbi Yankiv said, keep a low profile. You could be proud that you're a Jew, but don't flaunt it. Keep a low profile, be kind and dignified, and don't flaunt your Yiddishkeit. And I believe, that this leads us into the conversation of making sure that there's no assimilation. There's a Yiddish expression, and I'm going to say it in Yiddish, and I'm going to translate. Ob a Yid macht nit Kiddush, vet a goy machen Havdalah. If a Yid doesn't make Kiddush, and he doesn't sanctify himself, but he tries to be like the Goyim, then the Goyim are going to make Havdalah. They're going to make a separation. In other words, many times we think, we'll just be like them, right? That's what they thought in Germany. They're going to be just like the Goyim, right? Business, finances, everything. And look what happened. The hatred came out, and that's what happened in Lithuania as well. I was in Lithuania. I was in the house where Rabbi Chana was taken from. And the Lithuanians, for years, they got along with the Jews, did business and everything. But once the Germans came and opened up the torrent of hatred and killing, the Lithuanians were worse than the Goyim, than the Nazis. Rebbetzin Rishel Kotler, she was in that house. In Panaru, in that house, in Kovna, where Rabbi Chanan was taken from. And she told me that there was a German guard and a Lithuanian guard. And the German guard looked at Rabbi Chanan and saw his beautiful face. He saw the holiness in his face. He said, let him go. And the Lithuanian said, no, we can't. And it was the Lithuanian who kidnapped him. And they took him to that Fort 7 where he was killed. You can't trust any of them. We have to make Kiddush. We have to be separate. And you know what Hashem says? If you take a look in Rashi, in Kedoshim, it's absolutely frightening. Rashi says on the Pasuk, Vayikra Chof Pasuk Chavov, V'hayisa li Kedoshim, V'hayisam li Kedoshim, Ki Kodesh Ani Hashem. Be holy to me. And Rashi says, Imatem Muvdolim Mehem, if you're going to separate from the Goyim, you won't dress like them, you won't act like them, you won't talk like them, you won't be like them, then Harayatem Shali, then you're my people. But V'im Lav, then you're with Nebuchadnezzar and its Chaverim. We have to be sure that our children know that we are proud to look like Yidden. And we dress like Yidden. We don't use the slang of the Goyim. We don't use the music of the Goyim. We don't dance like the Goyim. Look, I don't want to say this, but you've got to say it. At some of the weddings, you see some of the dances, you kind of wonder, are these Jewish dances? Where in the world they get these dances from? You dance like a Goy. You know what happens? Hashem says, you're not going to dance like a Goy, so you're not my people. That's not my kind of dancing. That's not my kind of music. We have to be very careful with that. We have to be muvdolim. And I'll tell you what Bilam said. Bilam said about the Jews something, and it's in Parshas Balak, Hein om levadod yishkain. This is a nation that's going to live alone. Uva goyim lo yischashov. The goyim, they're not going to reckon with them. And you know what the Netziv says? He has a brilliant pshat on this. He says like this, Hein om levadod. If the Jews will live separately and not act like the goyim and be among the goyim, yishkain, they're going to live in peace. Uva goyim, but if they want to be with the goyim, lo yischashov. It's not going to happen. At the end, they're going to hate you. At the end, they will not recognize you. And you know something? Lavadot yishkoin, they'll be alone. The Balaturim says, that's B'gamatria b'mei Mashiach. That's what's going to happen in the time of Mashiach. If we want Mashiach, we have to be separate. That's part of fighting anti-Semitism and fighting assimilation. I just want to end just with this thing. I remember I once asked Rav Volba, B'keach Hador, the author of Halei Shur. I said, you know, I have the opportunity to speak to parents. What should I tell them? What should they do for their children? And he said something so brilliant. He said, tell them they're going to give two things to their children. Time and love. And my son was there. And he said, Rebbe, how much time? He was in the kollel. Maybe he was worried. How much time is he going to have to give his kids? And you know what Rav Volva said? As much as they need. And you know something? That's the great answer. If you validate your children and you make them feel special, they're going to follow you. And then there's going to be no assimilation. Now, we're not going to go out, and most of us are not in Kirov. We're not going to change the world. But we can change our families. How do we change our families? By having a happy home. When you have a good marriage, and we have a marriage counselor here who's par excellence, he'll tell you better than me. When you have a happy home and happy children, then the children are going to follow. There's going to be no assimilation. But if you're always beating down on the kids and you're always criticizing, you know what Rav Matisyahu said? Those kids are not dropouts. They're pushouts. We can fight assimilation in our families. That's what we have to do. And it spreads from there. We're not going to be able to change the world. Now, of course, you have great organizations like Eshat Torah and Or Sameach and JEP. That's great. And we should try to be Makarav, even our neighbors, our second and third cousins, and our employees, employers, all of them, as much as we can. But where we can focus on breaking assimilation is making sure that our children and grandchildren are so proud of being Yidden. When you go to buy a luf and an esrog, or you're building a sukkah, make sure the kids are there. Make sure they see how much you love a mitzvah. Make sure that they see how you love a rebbe. I always say every family has to have a Rav, a rebbe, and a Rosh Hashiva. And when you look up to that person and you really follow that person, the kids will learn from that. There's going to be no assimilation whatsoever because they know what your standards are. I just want to end with this. We say in Shemoneh Esrei on Yom Tov, Ata v'chatonu mikol ha'amim, ahavto isonu. After Isanu, Hashem loves us. Ata v'chatonu mikol ha'amim, ahavto isonu. Ata v'chatonu mikol ha'amim, ahavto isonu. Ratzisa bonu. Hashem wants us and loves us. And if we can only bring that to our children and tell them how we are the chosen people, not only for the rest of Yidden, but for the rest of the world, and we elevate that, if that's the case, I believe there'll be no assimilation whatsoever. Hashem should bench every single one of us that's listening all around the world. Let us try to be the best that we can be. Again, we're never going to stop anti-Semitism. That existential hatred that they have for us, that's Hashem's job. But the dislike, that we can change. The the assimilation that we can change in our families. We hope and pray that will be matzliach. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.
Rabbi Krohn, thank you.
My pleasure.
That was amazing, inspirational, and I do want to share that you and I had the opportunity to go to Ukraine together.
That's right.
Back in 2017. Amazing trip you had. My great-grandfather came from Ukraine, from Kiev, back in the late 1880s to Philadelphia. Total assimilation. I'm the only observant Jew in my family. And that trip was phenomenal. When I got back from that trip, we went and we found my great-grandfather who was buried. And when we found him, my wife said, pull out all the grass. It was very hard to find. And it turned out that one of the reasons we went to Ukraine, especially for my wife, was she wanted to go to the kever of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. So when we pulled back the grass, this cemetery had not been planted or taken care of in years, my wife started to cry. I said, why are you crying? She goes, I always cry. She goes, your great-grandfather's yard site is this Sunday. This Sunday, we're there on Tuesday, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev's yard site is this Sunday, also sharing with your great-grandfather. It's my birthday, and Rabbi Holtzberg, who's my first rabbi when I moved to Brooklyn. So, Rabbi, that was an amazing trip with you.
Sure was. It was
and
great.
I don't think we'll ever go back and have that kind of trip again, because that country was destroyed.
Amazing.
And talk about some of the biggest anti-Semites, the Ukrainians, what they've done to the Jews. The blood on that country is really pretty crazy. So, thank you. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Eli Goldbaum, Reb Goldbaum, who I met coincidentally when I went to start davening at the Boston Shul in Flatbush. And I was going there for the mikveh, but my wife said, why don't you go there and start to daven there also? So when I went there, the first time I went, Eli gave me Hagbah. I always loved doing Hagbah. And I said, before you give it to me, can I give you a bracha? I give brachas to Jewish men because of Rabbi Holtzberg. I've been doing this for over 8 years, almost every day except during COVID. And he said, well, my daughter's getting married next week. I'd love to have a bracha for my daughter and for myself. I said, that's great. And I said, my rabbi's son's getting married next week. He goes, who's your rabbi? I said, Rabbi Yosher Emmer. I said, my daughter's marrying his son. So from that moment on, he took me under his wing and has been taking very good care of me. And a little more than 3.5 years ago, Eli invited me to come with him to the Daf Siyum at MetLife Stadium. And it was phenomenal. I'd gone 7 years before. But this time when I got back, my wife said, well, I think you're actually ready to start learning the Daf. So because of Eli, I'm still in the game, learning the Daf every day. So Eli, thank you. And Eli has a very interesting background because he's very involved in the philanthropic side and saving Jewish lives. But he's also a major leader in the healthcare and taking care of different people in retirement homes and different facilities. And he's made quite a reputation for himself. And the purpose of this event this night and going forward is that we have very strong representation from the biblical side, but we also have very strong representation from very powerful Jewish businessmen. So, Eli.
Thank you, Tuvia.
Thank you for joining us.
Amazing. It's such an honor to be sitting here together with Tuvia, my friend, and close you did. And of course, Rabbi Krohn, to sit at the same table and to speak, it's a tremendous honor for me. I was listening to Rabbi Krohn speak, and again, I'm blown away as always with Rabbi Krohn, the way you speak. It's just a tremendous inspiration for Klal Yisrael, for us. I have so many thoughts based on what you have said, but I'm going to just jump on the last thought, and maybe we'll go back and try to remind ourselves of, as you always do, you recap so beautifully, so we'll recap and remind me of my thoughts. But just on the last thing that you spoke on, the Ata B'Chatanu, and I think we had spoken a little before about what the idea of what we're trying to accomplish here today. I think that we're trying to build a positive thought in Klal Yisrael to try to generate from within an appreciation and enjoyment of what we are. We're Am HaNivchar. I actually quite often have asked this question to people. They could be Hasidish, Litvish, anywhere in the game. And I would say to them, why are you from? And most people cannot answer that question. And if that's the reality, I think it's sad. Because, Tuvia joined us in the Boston Beis Medrash. As Tuvia mentioned, I've been the Gabbai for the last 25 years, and the Rebbe was Nifter a year ago, but I was extremely, extremely close to him. People don't understand what Rabbanim go through unless you're in in the world of, in the sphere of the Rabbanim, and they really spend a tremendous amount of time. And they also need somebody to bounce things off of. They're human beings and like to speak to everyone. I was very fortunate to have had a tremendous kesher with the Rebbe. But we haven't, it's not for everybody, but in our Beis Medrash, and it's something that you touched on that I think is so incredibly important, the idea that we enjoy going to davening. The nusach with the singing, the amount of songs that we have in the repertoire of the Boston Nigunim, not only Boston but other Nigunim, it's an enjoyment, and our children were brought up in such a place where there was a geschmack for Yiddishkeit, and that's exactly what you mentioned, and it's so true. If people used to ask, I walk about 15 minutes to shul. And people say, well, there's so many shuls along the way, why do you walk so far? Of course, I always joke, I get covered for walking there because I'm the gabbai. But putting that on the side, I really enjoy the davening there. I enjoy the chevrashaft. But more importantly, there's a geschmack. The Rebbe always spoke about the atav hachatanu. We are Yidden. We are every single Yom Tov. He would sit and give shiurim before the Yom Tov to make us excited with the Yom Tov. A hallel by us is 25 minutes, sometimes even longer, every piece you sing, and it's a geschmack. And it's not something that's, you feel like, it's dragging you down, like, what time can we get out of here? It's a geschmack, it's enjoyment. Shal Shudas, on a regular Shabbos, my family knows I come home a half hour after 72, sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little after. But the point is, it's a geschmack. You're sitting around a Shal Shudas, you feel good. When your children are brought up, that Yiddishkeit is a geschmack, of course they're going to feel great about Yiddishkeit. If you feel that everything is a drag, no, Shabbos, when is it over? I can't wait to get to see my phone. That takes away. So just to piggyback on what you said, Rabbi Krohn, I think it's phenomenal. And I think without a question, something that we should definitely think about. I'm going to go into some other thoughts.
Yeah,
you mentioned Ukraine. So I think that this is an incredibly important, I'm not the storyteller here today, but I'll try to say a nice story. My mother, and I'm a businessman, that's why Tuvia asked me to be here today. So I want to just give over a little of my chinuch in business, and I think it's incredibly important to the topic of conversation we have tonight, vis-a-vis anti-Semitism. My mother was born, everyone knows this, Ma, if you're listening, I apologize, but everyone knows her birthday. She was born in March of 1944 in a Ungvar, which was really Uzhhorod, which is in Ukraine. At that point, it was called Czechoslovakia.
So what was the birthday?
March 28th, 1944.
Uh-huh.
And she was born 3 weeks before the Nazis came in and took everyone away to Auschwitz. Anyone who has any history on Hungarian Jewry knows that in 6 months' time, from March till October, they wiped out 1 million Hungarian Jews. Any child was gone. The first thing you went to anyone who had a child going to concentration camps, they were wiped out. There was no one remaining. So at the time, they thought, and my grandfather just said, we thought this was like a curse. We had a child. Everyone else went into hiding because they knew the Americans were about 200 kilometers away. And they figured that the Americans are going to come and they're going to we're going to all be free and liberated and everything's going to be fine. The Americans did not move for those 6 months, and that's why Hungarian Jewry, for the most part, has been, wiped out. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of Rebbe's young rice is one who survived Hungary, but basically there were certain age groups that were able to work, and other than that, everyone older, younger, wiped out. So my grandparents had a baby. The entire family went into hiding. Because they had a baby, they went and they got false papers, and they lived as Goyim. And just as an aside, my grandfather used to say, if you think it's difficult to live as a Jew, it's much more difficult to live as a Goy when you're Jewish. He said he would go around and he would have to see, literally, it took Sifrei Torah. If you're talking about pain and to cry when you even say something like this, he would see that they used the Sifrei Torah as lampshades or whatnot, and he would have to make believe it didn't bother him so he didn't give up his cover. But more importantly, and this I think is, with the importance of understanding what we're trying to get to here, talk about anti-Semitism, you're talking about this small shtetl in a sense. It wasn't like in America. Over there everyone knew each other. It was a small town. So even if you go to the next town, as Rabbi Krohn said before, you could dress up with any cap you want. They know you're Jewish. And here he had to look like a guy. My grandmother had to look like a guy. The baby was a baby. Just as an aside, there was one cousin, Asher Shonkov. I don't know if Asher Shonkov was a half a year older than my mother, and it fits very nicely into the story. There was a galach that was like the mayor of the town. He was very close to my grandmother's father. And they apparently had money or some business or whatnot before, and he gave this galach a lot of money. And this galach gave my grandfather money throughout the war, so he was able to pay off the places that he was living. And at the same time, he took Usher, gave him to a doctor, and this doctor watched Usher. He was a half a year old, and his parents actually went to Auschwitz and survived separately and came back eventually. But because my grandfather kept an eye on him, it took a while. They weren't ready to give him back, but he ended up getting him back, and that's how he actually survived with his family intact. But even that, the thought that some guy gave the money, you gave him all the money, he didn't have to give anything. And I think that that's a very important point that I'm trying to bring out. The concept, and of course I'll go back to the story in a second, but the concept of how you treat people. And when you treat people properly, it could save your life. Forget about anything else. Right. But I could assure you they treated this guy with the ultra respect, or he would never have given a dollar.
And risk his life.
And risk his life. And it actually came up in the newspaper once that they found that this doctor was hiding Usher, and they actually did not. That's my understanding and my recollection of my grandfather told us. And they didn't have a problem, which was a pella.
Wow.
But going back to my grandparents, so they lived as goyim in Ukraine, and here they were going place to place, and like I said, you could try to hide it as much as you can, but everyone knows who you are. It's like as much as you live like a guy, and they managed, and they were fine. And my grandfather told us several stories that I think could also bring out this point. He said over a story that he was one time walking, and he sees a person who used to work for them. They had a big business in Ukraine, and this person was like, he said, oh my goodness, this guy, I think he was the truck driver, and mind you, there were maybe two trucks in the town. He recognized him, he worked with him. So he started running away. And all of a sudden, the guy was on a motorcycle, and it didn't take long for him to catch him. And he goes ahead and he says, Mr. Deutsch, that was my grandfather's name, Mr. Deutsch, why are you running away from me? What do you need? I'll give you anything you need. I'm going to help you. He took out, my grandfather said, a tremendous amount of money from his pocket and said, Mr. Deutsch, take what you need. It's mind-boggling. That's one story he said over. He said over another story that at some point he got a job working in a factory. And he used to kibitz about it. It was, like he said, the first thing they did to inaugurate you, this is a Goyish way, they went out to the pub to drink. And he said, I can't drink. If I'm going to drink, I'm afraid I'm going to blow my cover. So he couldn't drink. So they made fun that he drank like a Jew. So that's the side. But putting that aside, one day, there was a auditor that he used to sit in the business, literally working alongside with him, who came in to audit the books. So he said, I saw the guy, if he knows who I am, I used to sit with him. So he ran into the bathroom, he spent a little time, he said, I couldn't sit there all day, and eventually he came out, and he thought, that's it, it's over. Like you said, anyone they gave you in, they killed you, finished. If you didn't give them up, they killed him. He went home that night. He said he didn't even go home. He stayed in the park all night. He thought for sure they're gonna come pick him up. After morning, he figured if I don't go back to the office, they're gonna get me anyway. And he goes back to the office, and the owner calls him in and says, "Tell me, what's your name?" So he knew that they blew his cover. And he told him what his name was, his real name. And he says, "I want you to know that this auditor told me, tell Mr. Deutsch, as long as he's here, he has nothing to worry about." He's not going to give it. He's not going to send him, and he won't say a word. And he said after that, this owner of the business took better care of him than anybody else. He so appreciated him. What's my point of all this? They're all nice stories, and of course it's tremendous. And I love talking about my grandfather because he was my everything in life. He taught me a tremendous amount. And Baruch Hashem, he had a nice businesses here. I worked for him when I started in the business. He was such a gentleman. He didn't chummy up with his staff, but everyone respected him. There was a respect. He was just a type of person that when he spoke to his employees, and I try very hard, I have a very busy office with a lot of not from people, not from goyim that work for me, of all types. I never raise my voice, ever. I never, even if I have to say something to somebody, I learned from my grandfather, there's a way to give it over. When you blow your gasket, people just, it's a busy day, you can say something.
They lose respect.
This week's parasha, the Durham, first thing, words come out of your mouth. Words mean something. You go ahead, you blow it. Besides the Chil Hashem that you talked about, which is a tremendous problem, but when you speak nicely to them, they respect us. They respect us tremendously, and I see this in business. I guess that's my job here, to talk on the business level. I see it in the business. When you deal with your employees respectfully, you get them back. And what I learned from my grandfather is it saved his life, and in a sense, I'm here because of that. And if that's something that I could piggyback on,
right,
like I said, this is something that is incredibly important. So that was just an interesting thought that I felt as far as business is concerned, of something we could learn from.
What I did with my children, I have Baruch Hashem 5 children, is that every week I gave each of the children 20 to 25 minutes undivided attention. It was when they were growing up, there were no cell phones, but you want to go for pizza, we'll go for pizza. You want to go bowling, we'll go bowling. You want to learn Ezra, we'll learn Ezra. It's just me and you, nobody else. You want to do exercise? And how many fathers have a real conversation with their sons? How many mothers know their daughter's best friends or colors? But when you have a real conversation, not how was school fine, what did you get right, what did you get wrong, that's not a conversation. But then your child becomes your friend. And then they want to be like you. And so therefore that which you believe in, they're going to believe in.
It's an interesting point you're saying, Rabbi Krohn, because I actually did a video a while ago. We had some Rabbanim talking about these exact points.
Kidding.
They had a question.
They
said we were dealing more on shalom bias.
Right.
How do you build up shalom bias? How do you do to make it a positive experience in the house? And they said, how do I know? A lot of the work that I end up doing is mediating divorces, which we try to stick away from. But in the shalom bias arena, is that you want your children to know what a house should be in the future.
Right.
You have to show them in your house what it's like.
Model.
And when you're the role model and they know what a healthy home is, they're going to have a much better chance in the future.
100%.
But I think actually you one of the other topics that you spoke about was the affluence of the community.
Right.
And that's something that I really find, my grandfather would talk about that as well. The
concept to keep a low profile.
I have to love that pasuk because my bar mitzvah pasuk is the Barim. So
no kidding.
Yeah,
but did you know that Klei Yoka?
I did not know. I heard it from you before. I forgot it. I'm going to be honest, but I remind myself. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I do find that that is something that people. To me, that there's several concepts that I see.
What do you say about Rabbi Yankov not wearing the talis?
If we're talking about Yaakov, I used to daven with him every morning when he was by his son, Rabbi Avram.
Oh, sure.
I'm an old flappish guy.
Wow.
We actually lived right next to your brother.
Yeah,
so we lived on East 10th and M, and Rabbi Lander Shul had 1 million shachris, if people even remember that. 1 million 730, and Rabbi Yaakov used to daven with us every morning. And I one time had the call to ask him, give me a bracha.
Yeah.
So he says, "Zang gesund and stark." I said, "Okay, that's a good bracha. I can handle that." I was very close with his grandson, so it was at his bar mitzvah. But there's no question about it. We are, I'll give you a simple example of what I speak about as a businessman. I remember when I started my business, 1991, is when I started my business. I was working previously in a nursing home as a controller. I don't remember, I was earning $80,000, $100,000 a year. It was a very nice salary. But from people, I can have 5 children as well. Yeah. From people, I have to live in my house can't be the size of the house of the guy who's a non-Jew who has 1 child or 2 dogs, whatever he has. So we automatically have to have larger houses, which is the challenge, really, to what you were talking about. So we say we shouldn't poke the guys' eyes out, but the reality is we need bigger houses. We have a standard of living that is way beyond the guy's standard of living. So I remember one of my first I have a consulting company. One of the first jobs was I went to a nursing home, and it was a non-for-profit, and they had 2 guys working there that were sort of like a similar type of a job. And they would tell them they were living the life. They were making $100,000 in those days. It was a tremendous amount of money, and they had everything they needed. And I was trying to explain to them, I started my business and took a risk And it was a huge risk. I gave up salary to go ahead and try to earn more money. It was something that at that point there were no such consulting businesses. And I thank you Hashem at where I am today, but it took years to build that up. And I explained to them, I'm taking risks because I have to pay tuitions. I have to have a lodge. I have kosher food. Matzah. I said, my wife just took my grandchildren for shoes.
Yeah.
How many pairs of shoes do we need? We need a Shabbos shoe, a weekday shoe, twice a season. A guy buys a pair of sneakers, they're good to go. There's no Shabbos food, there's no Yom Tov food. We all know the expenses. And Baruch Hashem, I think that there's a piece that I'd like to talk about that I think I'd love to hear what you would say, Rabbi Krohn, on this. And Tuvia, feel free to jump in anytime you want as well. I deal with a lot of issues mediating, not only divorce, unfortunately business mediation and family issues. My business is more healthcare related. One of the things we do is we help people deal with their finances.
Wills and
we don't deal with it directly. We deal with more Medicaid pieces. But the idea, I get involved with a lot of people's family issues and whatnot. And I find, and it just to me personally, there's certain things that I think as a tzibur that we could work on. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. I find that I was asking around, what do we think the nekuda of anti-Semitism is? What is the point? Why do goyim have it? We understand Esav, Hussein, Es Yaakov, but there's something that I believe it's more than that. They still have to make it into what we believe is a regular thing. Why do I hate you? Right? There's something underneath. My thought: jealousy.
You took the word out of my mouth. Jealousy.
So.
No question.
I think that what you spoke about, and that's why I wanted to piggyback on it. The jealousy of that they have for us is somewhat inherent in the sense that, as I just explained, we have to have a greater lifestyle. We have to have larger houses because we can't live in a small 2-bedroom apartment. They can. So we're going to have larger houses, and we're going to have a more affluent lifestyle for those that could afford it, because we're taking more risks to earn additional income. And some Baruch Hashem, there are a lot of very successful people. Unfortunately, even in our society, there are people who are not successful. So we have this concept of, in my opinion, I see this a lot, of jealousy within the society, within our people. And what I find
you mean even from Yidden to Yidden?
Yeah. Family issues, and there's so many. To me, that's what I've seen as a common core issue that I think is something that I speak about often. I wish we could. Obviously, this is something inherent as well in our DNA, but to just bring it to the fore. And I'd love to hear you speak about your thoughts.
I do think that Baruch Hashem, when a parent has nachas, I always say, if something good happens to you in your life, don't tell it to anyone. There's only one person that you can tell it to that will be guaranteed to be happy, and that's your mother. But otherwise, even brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law can be jealous. I've seen in so many families where one sister married into a wealthy family and the other sister they don't have clothes to wear, nice clothes at a wedding, and it's very embarrassing. So they have to be a to that.
So these are the type of concepts that I think
not to talk about everything that's good, just to keep a low profile and just not to talk about it, just to thank Hashem, and don't make any big suda saydah. Nobody cares, unless somebody had an operation. But otherwise, somebody buys a new house, don't make a suda saydah about it. Nobody cares. Well, just going to be looking at your window shades in your kitchen and wondering why they can't have it.
Yeah, so that's part of the inner happiness.
Right.
That if people were inwardly happy,
right.
And it's difficult to. I had a Sheva Brachos recently.
Yeah.
And it was a very close friend of ours. They asked me to speak, and this is my vert. I don't know. Yeah. Curious your thought. Ahead. So say the Mishnah brings down, you should try to acquire a friend.
Right.
It doesn't say Knei L'cha Chaver.
Yeah.
Again, this is just my vert.
Go ahead. That's very good.
Now, I just came from the chasana. There's 800 people at the chasana. And I turned to the crowd and I said, how many people have 800 friends? I said, I believe we have 800 acquaintances.
That's right.
Right? So when it says Knei L'cha Chaver, I have to try to get one chava. And if I acquire one chava in my life, tremendous. So how do I acquire? What's called a chava? At the Sheva Brachos, what I said was that there's certain things that I wouldn't tell the general public.
That's right.
Secret. If I could trust somebody, that I could tell them a secret, that they're not going to betray me.
Right.
That, I believe, is what you call a friend.
Right.
And if you acquire one, that's phenomenal.
Right.
So
And they won't look down at you either.
That's correct. So, and that person will forgive you.
Right.
And that concept, that I just feel that I think that it's so important to talk about this concept. I see it so much of family issues, certainly divorces, goyim. You talk about all this thing. The jealousy factor, I think, is tremendous. A tremendous
But
problem.
as we said, many people bring it on themselves, and they don't have to.
And that's why I'm happy we're speaking about it, because I'm piggybacking on what you said.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it's very important.
And that's what happens when you focus on material things as opposed to focusing on the spiritual and serving Hashem.
Right.
And why are we really here? We're here to serve Hashem. And what does He want us to do? I'm coming back to why we're all here today. He wants us to unite. He wants us to unite as Jews, as fellow Jews, and for the observant Jews, which are fractured, to come together. For different organizations to come together in this process between now and September 29th. Very observant, not so observant, different organizations, everything's fragmented. And once we can put it together ourselves, then the non-observant Jews will really appreciate what we're doing, because they'll see what we're doing and really enjoy it. And that's all we can really do. That's how we fight anti-Semitism, is by being Jewish.
See, there's something that Rabbi Cohen always stresses. Rabbi is my Rebbe.
Yeah.
And many times we talk about, people that are from not having regard for people that are not from. And he said the truth is that they're all Tinnik Shanishba. You can't blame them. They never had Rebbeim, they never had parents, they never had ancestors. So you're living a life and you're blaming them and you don't like them because they never had that opportunity. They may be more kosher to Yidden than you are. And that's a way to look at it.
So I'm going to jump in on that. So I happen to have BJX started in my office.
Oh, no kidding.
So I'm very close to my finger, and I understand very well the concepts.
Yeah, they're very good, those brothers.
And basically, when it started, what was the concept? And I think it also talks to what you just said, Tuvia. We have so many people in our neighborhood. It's very nice. We're supporting all kinds of communities, and it's a great thing. I love a lot of those communities. I'm close to a lot of those Rabbanim. But in our neighborhood, BJX was in Flatbush. We started in Flatbush simply because the guy next to us knew nothing. And I think, just to piggyback also on what you're saying, that the concept of how easy it is to go ahead and to make an impact on somebody.
Right.
So I remember years ago, I worked my first job. We had a fellow in the office. He was Jewish, brought up Catholic, knew nothing, and he used to eat Chazaq. That's how bad it was. And we used to work with him, but every day we had a minyan for mincha, and he had a pride. I'm Jewish. His kids, who have a Jewish name, are not Jewish. Chris's wife wasn't Jewish, but he was Jewish. And he would come and join us for Mincha every day. I bought him an art scroll siddur, and every day he came to Mincha, he never missed Mincha. He wore a mezuzah on his chest. Of course, it wasn't a real mezuzah, just to look like a mezuzah, and he was busy the whole day kissing his mezuzah. Okay. He never missed davening. What was interesting is a few years later, he started fasting Yom Kippur. He used to watch the ball game, but he fasted Yom Kippur. And I think that really what you just said, Rabbi Krohn, just hit me in the head. I said, that's incredible, because that really is the start of a spark. True, that's the extent of what he's doing, and that's, who knows the schus of this person, that he could fast on Yom Kippur. It's incredible. But I think that's, talking to Tuvia, we're talking about this concept of how easy it is to just your neighbors. I had a next door neighbor, unfortunately passed away. He was a conservative Jew. I moved on the block. We brought him shalach manis. I don't think anyone else on the block brought him shalach manis. He used to go every Shabbos morning. There's a big conservative synagogue on Ocean Avenue between K and L. Every Shabbos morning he went there. He didn't know from anything Yiddish guy. And I know we made an impact on him because he used to go special to own nuts and buy us something every year to give us back. I brought him into my sukkah. Every year, Hashanah Rabbah, come to my sukkah,
beautiful.
shake a lulav. We don't realize the opportunities are abound. They're all over the place.
Right.
And I think that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
How easy, people say, I'm not into Kiruv. You don't have to be into Kiruv. I'm not in Kiruv either.
Right.
But you could be
do it.
Makav in your office. You could be
Right.
Makav in the house.
Everybody's got second and third cousins.
I think actually, you recall, when we spoke before, you were going to talk about the concept of driving.
Right.
I think you should expound on that concept. 'Cause maybe I'm too guilty on this one. So
No, but
I'd like.
even when you're driving, you cut off somebody or whatever, or you yell at somebody. I have a driver, so he's a Russian guy with a temper.
He said there's a rabbi in the car.
He loses his patience, and I tell him, listen, one day you're gonna get shot. You can't do that. You got to be able to be in control.
But I think what you said before, the concept that they all know the Jews.
That's right.
I hate to say it, you look at the license plate, everyone that has a leasing plate, is Jewish.
He has
the leasing plate,
Oh, the leasing plate.
The Jews,
Yeah.
the guy didn't buy from dealers.
Yeah,
We all buy
right.
from leasing companies,
Right.
So that's
I think the main thing really is to be a role model in every place, in the secular world, in the Yiddish world. If you're a role model, then people will learn from you.
Tuvia is my role model.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
I always say I have a tremendous respect for anybody who could give up a life of secularism
That's
and decide
amazing.
to become from.
Yeah.
I don't think we have an appreciation
No,
for
we
it
can't.
enough.
We
We
can't.
were born as from Yidden, this is our life, and we do our thing. But for someone to go ahead and to open their eyes and to realize how sad it is, and I've had many conversations with Tuvia down the lines of what we're talking about now, of this. I look at the guy and it's almost like pathetic. They don't have any enjoyment. What's the?
Right. What's their life?
You look at the Spitz guy. He made it. He's the celebrity. What happens to him? Half of them commit suicide.
Right.
It's mind-boggling.
Right.
That's what they're looking to.
I mean, that's why they hate us.
Yeah.
And that's why I was medayik in that Rashi. It wasn't that we makabel the Torah. Shaloik, they didn't take this. They didn't want it.
Right.
So they hate those who did it.
But then I think the Nakuda is the jealousy.
Yeah, 100%.
And they look at us and they see, and I see that
Fulfillment.
They see you
fulfillment.
happy. They see you going to Simchas, and
Right.
they. But I think also that in this concept that we speak about it, we have to just feel we are so fortunate to have who are from people.
You know what I say all the time? The word moedim, once occurred to me, is Bigamatria 100. You got to be grateful for 100% of the things that you have.
Yeah.
Everything.
I'm going to throw one thing in from my mediation life.
Yeah, please.
I find that, it's when people are going through challenges, and everyone has a challenge. There's no free lunch.
Yeah.
I think that's something
That's
that people have to understand. And everyone walks around, they say, how you doing, Rabbi Krohn? Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. You don't want to hear everyone's story, and they're not sharing the story. Everyone has something. And I think that as a gabbai, I know a lot of things that are going on that the average person doesn't know. And I'm sure there's plenty I don't know.
And I'm sure if the Rebbe spoke to you, then you certainly know.
Right.
Right.
And it's incredible what people are dealing with in life. And the concept...
Remember, I got to tell you something adorable about, I spoke at a Rebbinson's conference, but go ahead.
Okay.
No, you tell me. I'll go ahead, yeah.
So when you brought up a wonderful thought of people that they talk to me about their bitterness and what they go through in life, and I tell people, everybody, and this is really, I think, I'm a big chassid of reading Rabbi Miller's works, of you have to look and to appreciate what you do have.
Right.
And I think if people, we say brachas every morning, my friend Tuvia says my brachas every morning in the Besmedrash, and every morning when Tuvia says Pekeach Ivrim, he goes like this. We don't appreciate simple things that we have. And if we was focusing on what we do have and not focus on what we don't have, we'd be so much more appreciative. Everyone is dealing with challenges, but there's so many good things that we have. It pains me when I talk, especially people going through divorce, and that's an entire different world of the pain that people go through. And I just to throw it out, just aside, the community is great with so much that we do, but there's one piece that if I was able to change, it would be this. We get involved. We hear about a family machlekes, a divorce, whatever it is, and we only hear one side to the story. And if I've heard this 1,000 times, that people walk in, I don't understand this person, this rubber, whatever it could be. They never heard my side of the story. And yet, the people just get the feeling that there's something there, there's a, I call it TMI. I remember years back, there was a family that I knew, and I met one of the son-in-laws. And he just meets me on the street, and he's giving me all this information about their family issue. And I'm saying, why are you giving me so much information? Too much information. Why are you giving me this information? And I feel like the guy, there's no community. So when someone goes through a challenge, you're on your own. There's no one there to help you. But because we're a community, there are some people that know how to go. I don't know if they do it on purpose, not on purpose, not a point. But if you are if you're someone's sibling and there's an issue, if you really care about that person, don't take it to the street. It's almost mind-boggling, and yet there's so many people that do that, and
Now, what do you mean don't take it to the street? Don't tell everybody?
Don't tell everybody. Why are you giving me all this information? This person came over to me, it was unsolicited.
Right.
And then I find people that go ahead and they perpetuate it. They love the hawk, they love the talk.
Yeah.
Rabbi Bender spoke about it on my video, and I'll let you say it in a second. He spoke about this concept of, because there's such a fast-paced world and the internet and everything else, we got to a point, he said he believes that a lot of divorces were coming about because years ago, things were in the house, it was quiet. Today, in 1 second, it becomes world news. And everyone's sending, sharing, talking, and everyone figured out already, oh, I know this guy from before, I know that guy. No one knows anything. No one knows anything until you're in that person's situation and whatnot. And if we just would let everyone deal with their issues and not bring it and make a big noise about it and keep it private and whatever it is. And there are people out there, like, I don't charge for my time. I spend hours and hours helping people. I do not charge for my time. There's a number of people like that. And we try to help Klal Yisrael for one thing. Let's make shalom. Let's move beyond it. Let's make shalom bayis. That's our goal. If it can't be shalom bayis, let it be shalom divorce. If it's a family issue, keep the peace. And Chazaq Hashem have saved countless families. Of course, we don't talk about those details, and no one knows about it.
Right.
But when you deal with a divorce, everyone knew about the divorce. And, oh, he helped out. But I think, to me, that is the same nakuda that we keep talking about, this concept of trying to keep the peace within ourselves. Let's not talk about things. And again, it's something I'm passionate about, because I get the calls, people call me, they say, why is it that they just feel like there's a world against them? And, one smart therapist told me, they tell them they're not on trial. They don't owe it to everybody to explain their situation. It's not our business. Let them deal with it. Let's be.
A girl just called me. She wants to know why everybody hates her. She's 36, not married. Father abused her. It's just terrible.
So one of the big areas, and this is what we've been doing as another shiur that we've done for over almost 3 years, is on Shmiras Lashon, not speaking Lashon Hara. And you've spoken. It's a massive problem. What comes out of our mouths, and if we can control and don't say 50% of things that we want to say, our lives would all be much better. Whether you're observant, non-observant, what comes out of our mouth is one of the biggest sins. And if we can just change that and correct that, it changes the world.
I'm gonna end my.
I'm
gonna end my thought.
Yeah.
On one of the things that I tell people in Shalom Bayis. So I actually have a phenomenal marriage curriculum as well, Baruch Hashem. We're working on making good marriages great marriages.
Okay, great.
And one of the things I tell people is be selfish. So what do you mean be selfish? Marriage is not supposed to be selfish. I said, let me ask you. They come to me, they complain. I said this, my wife was upset at me, my husband was upset at me. We didn't talk for 3 days. I said, if you would learn to just not say it, for selfish reason, why be in a fight with your spouse?
Right.
Just don't say it, hold it back. If something has to be said, there's a time to say it. Say it a half hour later. Say it 2 hours later. Not when it's in it. When people are
don't say it at all.
I said if something has to be said, and there's a way to say it. When you say it, when you thought about it, I'm talking to myself. As we spoke tonight, we're talking to ourselves as well. Sometimes I said, do it selfishly. Why do you want to get into a situation where you're not going to talk to your spouse for 3 days?
Yeah.
Hold it back, and I think that's what you're saying. It's just a great this concept of Lashon Hara, Rachilas, Ma'aseh Shemra. When we talk about it, it does hurt. It stings and it hurts a lot of people. So again, thank you, Tuvia, for inviting me to join.
Thank you.
How about one last wrap-up thought from both of you?
I just want to tell you that little thing about I had to speak for Rebbitzins. The first time I spoke in America, one time in England I spoke about it for about 60 Rebbitzins. What their lives are all about and how they should be and whatever. So of course I interviewed many of them, to get a concept of what they go through. So one Rebbitzin told me the most amazing thing. She said, "I am so lonely at the supper table." I said, "What, your husband is not there?" He said, "No, he's there, but he can't tell me anything. Because everything that he knows, I know who he's talking about." Mm-hmm. So we sit at the table, and a doctor or a lawyer or travel agent can tell his spouse, what happened during the day. But anybody that he's going to tell me, I'm going to figure it out. So we just sit there.
I'm better with my wife, but she doesn't. I practically never take this work home.
Really?
I think it's incredibly important. It's not. I never take phone calls, in front of my kids ever.
Yeah.
It's not their business and whatnot. I generally will do most of my work during business hours. Believe it or not.
Really? Wow.
And I'll tell you, interesting. Hashem has blessed my business since I started this about 10 years ago.
Really?
Things that I cannot explain. I'll be there.
Really? What is your business? Excuse me.
We'll talk about that off.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I'd like to thank the Chazaq organization, Rabbi Yanav Mirov, our dear friend Robbie, for coordinating this with us. And today is really the first day of the rest of all of our lives, because we're here to change ourselves, we're here to change our Jewish communities, and by the change we make, we'll change the world. So this is an official invitation for everybody to join us on September 29th to come and do one mitzvah, to light a candle. And why do we light? We light everything. We light up the world. We light it with Shabbos we start with. We light with Hanukkah for many days. We light for Havdalah. We light for yard sites. So
Kiddush.
Every Jew, observant, non-Jew, you can light one candle and you can say in memory for all the people that have died during this war. No one's saying Kaddish for most of the people alive and don't know Kaddish because their families are not Jewish. They're Jewish, but they're not observant. So no one's saying Kaddish. So it's very important that we all get together. All the various organizations join, the big federations, the Chabads. I'm reaching out to everybody. This is the unification. It's an announcement. We're unifying the Jews in America on this day. And I appreciate you coming here and supporting this effort. And it's going to be like something we've never done in America before. And we got to do it while we still have time.
Thank you for allowing me.
Thank you.
Thank you.